This action-packed narrative painting, entitled The Triumphs of Love, Chastity, and Death, circa 1460s, attributed to Girolamo da Cremona, displays a rich landscape hosting its linear narrative of evocative scenes to be read from left to right. The first segment, The Triumph of Love, features Cupid aiming his arrow of love at a bear man bound and tied to a chariot pulled by two luminescent white steeds, directed by another winged Puto. Surrounding them are a host of characters in various dress, from simple linen dresses to more ancient-looking armor from tales of yesteryear. The middle segment hosts the triumph of chastity, where the virtue of chastity, or temperance, has been personified and stands atop the chariot looking victorious holding a palm leaf. In place of the previous nude male character, there now is bound the Cupid of the previous panel. Unicorns pull this chariot, with an all-female cast about them. The third and final segment of this work represents the triumph of death, which is now presented in a barren landscape, a stark difference from the prior sections, and a grim skeletal character holding a scythe now driving the chariot on. The black oxen struggle to pull the cart over the mangled bodies it crushes beneath, and not a soul stands but Death himself. This imagery is part of a painted narrative that became very popular as a theme during the late 15th and 16th centuries, and it derived out of a literary work known today as Petrarch's Triumphs, from the writings of the poet Petrarch. While this panel only represents half of that story, the entire League of Triumphs includes love, chastity, death, fame, time, and divinity, or eternity. The story unfolds as each successive model becomes overthrown by the last, and they all nestle into one another, promoting the idea that, for instance, fame outlasts death, but time will eventually defeat fame, and those once famous become forgotten, but that time itself is swallowed up by divinity at the end of it all. This is a really interesting tale because it both employs classical pagan conceptions and characters as well as upholds the Christian model of the universe. As humanist learning became popularized in the 15th century, this quickly gained traction in the art world as well, which facilitated a reintegration of imagery and ideas from antiquity into Christendom. This tale, in part, reflects the uniting of classical virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, or chastity as seen here, and the three Christian virtues they add on of faith, hope, and charity, or love. This merged classical learning, taking the wisdom of their stories with familiar characters and heroes and histories, through allegory with Christian moral themes. It successfully showed through the use of pagan and classical iconography in art to symbolize the triumph of Christianity over it. This adaptation of ancient pagan traditions and themes not only became an accepted mode of conveying Christian thought, but paved the way to the heart of the Renaissance in the 16th century, when it fully blossomed as an all-out rebirth of classical antiquity. Girolamo da Cremona's work here serves as an excellent early example of this phenomena taking off before we see it in full bloom during the High Renaissance. By observing the material and dimensions of this particular panel, scholars predict that this piece is likely to have originally been part of a wedding chest, which were known as cassoni. Petrarch's triumphs were a very popular choice of design for these items during the time, as it served to represent the fidelity of marriage and the virtuous woman. These wedding chests were incredibly valued by the family, and after they would have been paraded through the streets on the big day, they would have found their home in the bedchamber, where, lined with a high-quality fabric of some sort, served as the perfect place to preserve the wives' most precious gowns and linens. These painted chests were such a staple in society by this point that workshops became dedicated to their sole production. Many were complete with a host of carpenters, painters, and gilders, all employed under one roof. This helped standardize the process to meet the market demand. Though it has not been confirmed, it is plausible that Girolamo da Cremona could have worked in one of these workshops during his time painting this piece here. Practically speaking, these chests were a big expense for most families. It was even common for the peasantry, albeit their designs were mostly reserved to small motifs such as hearts or flowers. With that being said, these workshops, who had several apprentices working under the tutelage of a master painter, would have provided an emerging market with an attainable product they could afford, as opposed to relying solely on a master artist with a higher price tag. These more elaborate, classically inspired narrative scenes thus gained their traction as the preferred style of the day. Girolamo da Cremona's work, The Triumphs of Love, Chastity, and Death, served to elucidate the lifeway and culture of 15th century people and the works of art and furnishings that would have surrounded them in their lives. The imagery in this piece stands as a reminder of the ideas that were burgeoning in medieval culture in the lead up to the peak of the Renaissance in the 16th century. It also improves our understanding that the classical iconography and ideas of antiquity were not just a concept reserved for the highest art forms, but were readily integrated into the heart of the citizenry who commissioned their inclusion on the most precious of their items, as explored here with the cassone. This particular work, though not heavily studied or deriving from a household name in art history circles, is a remarkable piece which represents the central aesthetic which fashioned 15th century medieval culture and reminds posterity of the attitudes and style that defined the era.